What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hello, my name's Melissa. Today we'll be talking about my top 2022 movies, and I'm doing it via movie superlatives. Let's jump right into it. Let's start off with the most anxiety-inducing. Watcher. Watcher follows a young American woman who moves with her husband to Bucharest and begins to suspect that a stranger who watches her from the apartment building across the street may be a local serial killer decapitating women. I don't see enough people talking about this one, and it's such a damn shame. It is an effective thriller. It's not anything groundbreaking in terms of the story. We've seen stalker movies before, but I think this one was just so well done. From the start, when she first notices someone maybe watching her from afar, and then the watcher feels closer when she feels like she's being followed at places like the movies, the grocery store, and she's terrified to even look over her shoulder, afraid of what she might see. The way it builds the paranoia, the anxiety, and the dread. And also you feel for the main female character as she's feeling terrorized and no one believes her, not even her husband. If you haven't seen it, go watch, come back, report in the comments what your thoughts are. The wildest ride. Barbarian. Barbarian follows a woman staying at an Airbnb in a seedy part of town and discovers that the house she has rented is not what it seems. I went in completely blind, meaning I hadn't even seen a trailer of this movie, but I kept seeing it pop up on social media, and of course that made me naturally curious about it. I think that was the best way to watch this because it adds to the air of mystery this movie has. You're in the shoes of this main female character and you're along for the ride as she's forced to stay in this Airbnb in this creepy part of town. Is he some nice stranger or a psychopath? Things go off the rails as we discover things about the house in the present day, and also in turn, we learn about the history of this house of horrors. Drop me some more recommendations for Barbarian like horror movies. So are there more Airbnb horror movies, hotels, motels, hostels? Let me know. The best requel, Scream 2022. 25 years after a streak of brutal murders shocked the quiet town of Woodsboro, California, a new killer dons the Ghostface mask and begins targeting a group of teenagers to resurrect secrets from the town's deadly past. I grew up on Scream, so I was cautiously optimistic. I mean, it is after all the 5th entry to this franchise. I was pleased to find out. Just because it is the 5th movie to a franchise does not make it automatically bad. In true Scream fashion, this movie called itself out and pointed out the efforts that have been made before to create requels. It was engaging, funny, meta, and extremely violent, making it a bloody good time. I also like the fact that there was commentary on fandoms and how sometimes the obsession and entitlement can become toxic. Are you excited for Scream 6? The most surprising, Top Gun Maverick. After 30 years, Maverick is still pushing the envelope as a top naval aviator, but must confront ghosts of his past when he leads Top Gun's elite graduates on a mission that demands the ultimate sacrifice from those chosen to fly it. Full disclosure, okay? I did not grow up with the original Top Gun. It's just not something that I grew up on. I was a Mission Impossible girl, and I still am. So I just naturally had no initial interest in watching this, but this is something that I saw took over the world. I saw it all over social media, and I kept seeing an overwhelming amount of good reviews, and so that made me stop in my tracks, and I was like, well, I have to check this out. The internet is telling me that this is actually a really good sequel, so I gotta go. When has the internet ever let me down? It was very, very hyped, and sometimes that can be a detriment to a movie because it's so hyped and the movie just lets you down. But this movie, the hype was real. Imagine my surprise that I really liked this movie. One thing Tom Cruise will do, he will make an adrenaline pumping epic movie. This didn't have the right to be this good. Just because sequels that come out 20 or 30 years later are rarely good, but this had emotions, this had stakes on top of stakes, and they would pay off each time. There's even a Deus Ex Machina at a certain point towards the end of the movie, and you see it coming a mile away, but amazingly, you don't care because it makes so much sense and it's cathartic. You feel a sense of relief and you feel so happy for the heroes. The most pretentious, The Wonder. Set in the Irish Midlands in 1862, the story follows a young girl who stops eating but remains miraculously alive and well. English nurse Lib Wright is brought to a tiny village to observe 11-year-old Anna O'Donnell. Tourists and pilgrims mass to witness the girl who is said to have survived without food for 4 months. I call this pretentious because it is, but it's still good. The main great thing about this is Florence Pugh's phenomenal performance. I enjoyed watching her slow integration with her encounters with the people of this town. She's very skeptical as she watches and researches the little girl, but in private, she's really dealing with her demons. She's dealing with her own way to numb her pain. I thought it was well paced, well acted. It had interesting takes on what stories people tell and choose to latch onto and what they choose to believe, because we all know and we all have reasons why we choose to believe in certain stories. I am the biggest question asker, and this didn't give me all the answers, which I think a lot of the times can be frustrating and, come off pretentious. But this movie, I found it so absorbing, and Florence is so great in it that I didn't mind. The most tear-jerking: Avatar 2: The Way of the Water. Jake Sully lives with his newfound family formed on the extrasolar moon Pandora. Once a familiar threat returns to finish what was previously started, Jake must work with Neytiri and the army of the Na'vi race to protect their home. Is this a familiar story about colonizers trying to steal indigenous people's resources? Yes. Is it still good? Also yes. Avatar 2 follows familiar beats with the first movie and even from a million other movies that we've seen before. But the world gets larger as we get to see a different clan, which are the Reef people, while Jake Sully and his family are the Forest people. This new addition made this an engaging watch, and the whole family has to acclimate. And then of course we have an antagonist that may be deemed as being brought in a convenient way, but I would argue and say that it was a diabolical way. This movie pulled at my heartstrings, as I'm a sucker for when characters bond with creatures of nature. There's characters going through moments of isolation, feeling like you don't belong, being an outcast, not being seen, and going through the trauma of moving in a new environment. I was buckets of tears by the end, and this hit all the high notes for me. The most disturbing retelling: Pearl. Really quickly, I forgot to mention, Pearl is not an actual retelling, but when I watched it, it felt very much like a fucked up version of The Wizard of Oz, which is why to me I was like, oh, this is like the best retelling. So, quick correction on that. Pearl is the prequel movie to 2022's X. In 1918, a young woman on the brink of madness pursues stardom in a desperate attempt to escape the drudgery, isolation, and lovelessness of life in her parents' farm. I was not a huge fan of X, actually. It was a movie that I watched earlier this year, and I was just like, okay, that's the thing that I watched, and I quickly moved on. I didn't really think about it much, and so I didn't really have an interest in watching Pearl. But then I saw Spooky Astronauts, who is a wonderful horror content creator right here on YouTube. I saw her post the score music on her IG story, and I loved it. It sounded very old school, like 30s, 40s. It sounded like something out of like old school movies, and I love that stuff, and I love movie scores. So that instantly intrigued me, and I decided to check this movie out, and I'm so happy that I did. This movie starts, and we're immediately introduced to Pearl, who's a woman living on an isolated farm in Texas and has dreams of being in show business. The frames of this movie are picturesque, it's vibrant and colorful, and this very much is structured as heightened reality because Pearl romanticizes her life. She desperately wants to escape as she has big dreams. And who hasn't felt stuck in a rut and fantasized? Mia Goth is excellent in the title role as a disturbing, lonely woman with big dreams. She's got a monologue in here that's a continuous long take. I think it's 9 minutes. It's as fit for any awards as any other great drama that comes out this year. And those are my top movies of 2022. I did not know that by the end of this year that most of the movies on this list would be horror movies. Who am I? Who-ish? I would love to hear your guys' top movies of this year in the comments below. I'm always looking for good recs. It's the nerd in me. I love talking about books, movies, and TV shows. So please leave me your list in the comments below. If you enjoyed this content, please go ahead and support by subscribing, hit the thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys next time.